You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.
So we'll see if that maintains throughout the special as we welcome on our next set of special guests. Let me now go out to the sleepy hamlet outside of Chicago, known as St. Charles, where we are joined once again by Mr. Uncle Mike Tosaw from St. Charles Wealth Management. Uncle Mike, welcome back to our election night special, sir. Or I should say, welcome to it.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. This is the only place I'm convinced in existence where there won't be some type of bias, either liberal or conservative. The only bias that we're going to have here tonight is going to be towards what the markets are doing. And the biggest arguments that we're going to have is if we're bullish or bearish on things. And if you don't like that, then by gosh, you're not American.
Then you're not American indeed. I couldn't have said it better myself. And we're also joined here on the special tonight by Mr. Eric Metz from SpiderRock Advisors. Eric, welcome to our Options Insider Election Night special, sir.
Thank you. Good to be here.
All right, let's start as we have done with everybody. Let's go around the horn. Since, Eric, we got you on here, we'll start with you, sir. Obviously, a lot's been going on. This has been a big talked about election and a big talked about volatility point since the beginning of the year. We were talking earlier on our special tonight about how this election bump has been priced in at least since January and how it has evolved throughout the year. Obviously, other volatility events have come and gone in the interim, but that election bump persisted and remained until about a couple of weeks ago. So a lot to unpack there. What's been lighting up your tape and what's been on your radar over there at SpiderRock leading into this very busy day, sir?
No, you couldn't have summarized that better, Mark. Saying this year is unprecedented is an understatement. I mean, coming into the year, the election was forecast and hyped it in the regard that you just highlighted. But, entering coronavirus and the most vicious sell-off we've had in a 14-day span, coupled with the Q2 rally that was the fastest retracement rally on record. And, you enter in, to the political scene here in November, and that election bump, was really priced in, and then it dissipated, right? I think the markets can sniff out information faster than any media or poll. And I think you saw that transpire in both, the VIX futures curve, but also in markets in general, both on sector positioning and the aggregate market and the S&P itself. So, more to come as news, will translate into the markets. But, I think the markets are, it's been a fortuitous year for them, given all things considered, and when what happens, going forward, time will tell. But, looking forward to diving into debating that.
All right, and same question for you, Mr. Uncle Mike, sir. Obviously, probably a busy time over there at St. Charles Wealth Management, doing a lot of put rolling, I'd imagine, for a lot of the clients. I'm sure a lot of the calls coming in are like, hey, how can I get some of those put things? So what's been lighting up your tape and on your radar as we approach this volatility and trading day of days, sir?
Well, what I thought is really interesting, what's lighting up my tape right now is that the one day the options that expire tomorrow, the straddle from the beginning of the day today to the end of the day today, went from 12 points on SPY, or I should say 120 points roughly, in the S&P 500, down to roughly 80 to 90 points approximately at the end of the trading today. So there's a lot more, a lot of vol came out during the day today. And of course, we had a market rally. And this is kind of like any election in that Trump thinks he's going to win, Biden thinks he's going to win. And of course, that's natural. I don't fault any of them for that. I can fault both of them for a lot of other things, but that's another story. But I think that when we have some vol coming out like that, it's not surprising just because there was just so much of it. And what's going to be like right now on the election night, it's too early to call anything. It's just one of those things to where you'll see when you look on TV, you'll see one candidate leading 90% to 10%, but they only have like 1% of the precincts reported. So it's still really too early to tell anything right now. It looked like last I looked that Trump looked like he's somewhat in the lead in Florida, because I think they had roughly 90% reporting. But as we go on tonight, it's going to be interesting to watch the S&P futures. I remember we were limit down on the S&P futures back in 2016 when this happened. And so just so our audience knows, limit down means it's not going to the futures markets will not trade any lower. That's on the S&P futures, meaning they just stop trading. You can buy it at a higher price, but you're not able to sell it at a lower price until the open of the cash market the following day. And we were at that for a while in 2016. So it wouldn't surprise me if we had something like that, because yes, 2016 was definitely a surprise to the market. But this year, it seems to me that no matter what happens, it's going to be a surprise, whether it's a tight Biden win, tight Trump win, landslide by either side, or a contested election, or just we don't know the results yet. It's going to be a surprise no matter what, because there's no normalcy that's going on here. You can't really say that Biden has it locked because of the fact that the polls are doing well for him, because that's the same way it was for Clinton 4 years ago. So I think right now this could be the thing I'm not seeing happening tomorrow morning is that we maybe are going to be the same. I don't see us opening at the same price we closed at today, whether to the upside or the downside, I can't tell you. But I don't see an unchanged overnight futures market.
Interesting. Well, if the past is prologue, they'll have to wait until Mr. Rhodes joins me, and the second he comes on, we're going to see some big announcement. The futures are going to sell off like crazy. Volatility is going to explode, and that'll be a replay there of 2016. But I'm curious. We have a poll going on right now. I want to get each of your thoughts on this as well. I'm kind of getting the pulse of everybody who comes on tonight. Do you think by the end of the evening we will know the victor in one way or the other? Uncle Mac, we'll start with you, sir.
Yep, I do. I think it's going to be a landslide on one side, and I'm not going to say who, but I do think we are going to have a victor by midnight Central Time. Interesting. So by the time I lose my voice, we'll know who the victor is. Eric, same question for you, sir. Do you think we'll know the results here anytime tonight, or do you think this is going to be one that drags on for a while?
I appreciate the qualification statement in that it's midnight Central. If it's midnight Central, I will define a winner. Again, I'll err on the side of nonpartisan and not opine as to whom. But yes, midnight Central, I think it's clear.
Wow, our audience, I don't think I've ever seen them as split on an issue as they are. This has been locked pretty much down the middle since we posted it, a couple of hours ago now. It just ticked again, and they both are exactly tied again. Our audience, we asked you, of course, do you think we'll have a clear victor in election 2020 tonight? Yes, definitely. No, it will take days, or I don't know. And right now, yes, definitely, and no, it will take days are both tied. 46.1% each exactly. So our audience split down the middle. Just, I can't blame you. I mean, I know Matt was pretty certain in his prognostication early, and a surprising one. But outside of that, it doesn't seem like a lot of people are super convinced in one way or the other. About 7.9%, almost 8%, saying that they think it will. Dan, what are your thoughts here on our poll and the way everyone's leaning one way or the other in terms of what there would be a victor, sir?
As far as a victor, what is required for someone to be the victor is to have a concession speech by the other candidate. And so in the last election, 2016, I actually got back from China that morning. And, my sleep schedule was all messed up. I couldn't sleep. And so I ended up staying up all night just watching the news channels, watching the election. And that election we thought was close. And that didn't really end until probably about 3 o'clock in the morning, as I recall. I will bet anyone who is on this show right now $500 that we don't have a victor. We don't have a concession speech by midnight Central Time tonight.
Interesting. So not a concession speech. So not an official. We may be declaring a victor, but there may be no concession speech. Interesting. And I like that caveat on. I'm a little happier with that caveat you put on there out there. But yeah, you never know the networks. They could be calling. What was that like? Getting off the plane from China right in the middle of and pretty much the heart of the democratic process, sir. That contrast must have been pretty stark.
Yeah, it was interesting, fielding a lot of uncomfortable questions with my colleagues when I was there, and then getting back to see a very, very different reality was interesting to say the least. That's for sure.
Did you get off the plane and just kiss the ground and say, I cherish my voting?
I was happy to vote. I did vote that day. And it's an important process. It's too late to tell people to go vote, but I hope you did.
Well, you can still vote in our poll, so make sure you do just that. We've got K Miller 501 chiming in the chat saying, "I'm going to change my vote, I don't know after all this talk." He says, "But it's such a touchy subject, so strange. We are very strongly split." Yes, that's our country right now. We are very strongly split. You're right. It is odd that it is exactly to the 10th of a decimal point, even on both sides. That is kind of strange, but still, nonetheless, that's what we find on these strange nights. Speaking of strange, a little bit more downside on the S&P futures. I had about a 33.35, actually taking down to 33.34 now. So about 50 handles below where they were not too long ago here on the special. So maybe the market's pricing in some uncertainty or maybe some certainty and they don't like the outcome. Either way, not looking good for the bulls out there. Certainly not the massive sell-off and annihilation we saw back in 2016. But hey, the night is still young. Speaking of the night being young, let's see how they're updating some of the vote counts. They're saying right now some of the crucial states everyone's watching, Ohio, of course, Florida, Pennsylvania, those are still too early to call out here. But right now, it depends. Now, it's funny, CNN saying Virginia too close to call. AP is calling it for Biden. They're putting Biden now at 131 electoral votes. That puts him for Vermont, Virginia, Massachusetts, again, according to the AP, others not calling Virginia for him. Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, Illinois, Rhode Island, New Mexico, New York, Washington, D.C., and Colorado. Washington, D.C. with their whopping 3 electoral votes. Trump, as of this tally at least, has 92. That puts him at Kentucky, West Virginia, South Carolina, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, Indiana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Nebraska, and Louisiana. Not a heck of a lot of surprises, but maybe a few out there. I don't know, Eric, any of these states out there come as a surprise to you, or maybe a surprise that some folks out there and some outlets are being as circumspect as they are and not calling things perhaps as early as they used to?
I'll tell you, the thing that's just most amazing to me is Texas. I mean, you didn't mention it in the ones that, have already been decided, but I just recall for as long as I can even fathom that Texas was always a hardcore Republican state, and seeing that one potentially get flipped, I think is a testament to the other side of the fence on historically speaking as to where Texas sits, but I think could be a litmus test here for the greater landscape here. So that's the one that from my lens I think is indicative of the outcome and drawing keen attention to that, especially non-Austin, non-Dallas metropolitan to see the result in Texas.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier in the show. You're right. I mean, Texas has been a reliable red stalwart for, you're right, as long as I can remember. In fact, we were just talking about it at the very beginning of the special. We had to go dig up a trivia fact, and I believe it was the director of risk over there at Swan who said it was since 1976. You got to go that far back for the last time that Texas swung Democratic. And coming into today, it was very much in play. It was, they were calling it, as opposed to red, more of a pink. The polls were mostly within 1% of each other, which is very much within the margin of error. A lot of that, of course, caused by the changing demographics of Texas. We have immigration from the South and immigration from the rest of the U.S., too. We're hearing a lot of stories of people moving from, let's say, the Northeast and the West and moving to southern states that are warmer, maybe a little bit less restrictive during times like this. So that's changing the demographics down there as well. The Meatball, he'll be on in a little bit. He's now an Austonian. He used to be out here in the suburbs. So maybe a lot of that may be helping to change the demographics of Texas as well. And you're right, they have not called that one as well. Mr. Dan, sounds like you were hoping to have a little bit of action. Any takers here in the backroom chat here while I was talking, sir?
I don't know. I mean, I'm chatting with Mike a little bit over here, and I think we might have a little bit of action, Mortimer, on this. And the loser has to admit it on their show, which is, like bragging rights. I mean, hey, man, to me, that's worth more than money. So, all right, done, Mike. We've got a bet, baby. Let's do it.
It's on. I'll send you $1 in the mail. You send me $1 in the mail. Winner take all, baby. And then the loser has to admit on their show. Mr. Longo, can you hold us to that on our respective shows?
I will be happy to hold you to it. And by my count, you're still open on $499, Dan. So Luke or Eric, any takers on Dan's $500 election bonanza? Going once, going twice.
Well, I'm on the same side as him. They're not going to count the Michigan votes for another 36 hours. And unless you can flip Texas and Florida to say the rest of those states don't count, I just don't see. Plus, as I said, there's already 2 lawsuits, one in Nevada by President Trump about counting votes, mail-in votes, and one somewhere else. I don't see it by midnight central.
And maybe you want to add on. Maybe you want to bump up Dan to like 1,000 and see what takers you got out there. What do you think? Any listeners, you want some of this action, just let us know in the chat. We'll get your PayPal sorted out and everything behind the scenes here. Maybe you take crypto as well, Dan?
I maxed out my election wager budget. Otherwise, I'd bet more.
Dan, you take crypto, maybe a little Bitcoin can sneak in there as well?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, in increments of 1 Bitcoin.
Whoa, that's a lot. I think Bitcoin ticked over 14,000 tonight. So we're seeing some interesting. Let's go back and check out on some of these other products outside of the indices. It's a little bit shy of 14,000 right now, 13,775, but still feeling a robust move up about 2.25% on the day. So all this talk about, these things are uncorrelated. Well, right now, kind of holding to that, but we have said before, when it all hits the fan, all these products tend to move in lockstep. Everyone's dumping things across the board. Eric, you guys obviously see this probably a lot right now. It's probably an interesting, maybe a frustrating thing you guys have to deal with. People come to you, maybe they have a portfolio they think is sufficiently diversified. They have a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Maybe they got some equities, some fixed income, maybe a little bit of gold if they're really daring out there. And then they think they're fully diversified. And then an event comes like March, or what we saw a week or two ago, or maybe, who knows, the night is still young, maybe even tonight, and we see all of these assets moving in lockstep. A, how exciting and or frustrating is that for you? And then B, maybe the reason I say it's exciting, because maybe that's a good counterpoint for you to come to them and say, hey, by the way, these option things could maybe handle that for you, Eric.
You couldn't be more correct, Mark. I can't tell you how many instances people come with a diversified portfolio and it ends up being all the same thing, which is S&P. At the end of the day, though, you look at how asset allocation and portfolio construction is devised historically, it's challenged today. So you can't actually fault them for having things that all, rhyme collectively, because the fixed income landscape is, it's dismal, right? I mean, the defense mechanism that fixed income historically provides and sell-offs, it's somewhat mathematically impossible for that to continue going forward. And if you're going to have that as a placeholder just for, volatility dampening, that's where the options start to take a real, focal point in the conversation, which is we can get you that same volatility dampening with equities, using different instruments, whether or not we use the jargon of a put or a call option and the merits therein, the effect is the same, right? And so, you look at all of the I would say portfolio construction, modifications that have happened in the last really 10, 15, 20 years in the advent of ETFs. And the correlation has gone up. It's definitely gone up. It's hard to get diversification away from, the equity asset class. But frankly, that's what monetary policy has forced people to do. So you can't fault anybody in their portfolio construction. The goal is to then just kind of steer them and really solve for the objectives that they're trying to solve for. And, two portfolios identically built have potentially different objectives. So understand the objectives and then solve for those. And, that's all you can control.
Luke, I'm sure you probably have some thoughts on this as well. This is what you guys do over there at Equity Armor. How challenging is it for someone to come to you and think they're diversified in those moments like March or a couple of weeks ago? Or like Eric was saying, do you see that maybe more like an opportunity to say, hey, we can do some interesting things with options and or volatility that you can't do just buying 35 different underlyings that at the end of the day are all correlated to the S&P?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both for us. As Eric said, and as everyone knows, I think 40% of the NASDAQ is the S&P. And when you break it down and look at the components of these indices, Microsoft, Apple, Google, you might have 6, 7, 8 funds, but really what you have is one fund. And then when the market goes down, you think you're diversified. Yeah, it turns out you weren't diversified at all. And the way we do it, as I did some stuff with the partners in the NASDAQ earlier in the year, we were going with a barbell strategy in January. And we said you need to have these two buckets as your barbells. One side, dividend-paying stocks, S&P stocks. This side, NASDAQ, tech stocks, and some growth. And for a while, leave the middle alone. You're not going to get anything out of the middle. And you should own those things with some volatility or a hedge, and try to stay in the market because it's getting harder and harder to stay in the market when all the assets move in the same direction, right? So you thought you were diversified, the market goes down, all your mutual funds or ETFs have gone down. It makes you want to sell out of the market, and you're selling out at the low, and we all know the math behind that, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it has gotten harder for investors to try to find some new ground to try to be diversified, but the market is what it is, and this is the way we're doing it right now. We're doing it with a barbell strategy. You have to own some vol, and that's how we're moving forward for 2021.
Speaking of moving forward or perhaps upward, that's exactly what's been going on out here. S&P futures feeling the rally at about 33.75 right now. That puts them about 40 handles higher than they just were the last time we checked them, and then about almost 10 handles below where they kind of maxed out during the show, right around that 33.85 level. Right when Dan started talking, Dan Gramza, of course, about that 3,400 level maybe being a bit of a ceiling. And then all of a sudden it turned right back around, dropped down to like 33, 35 or so. Now rallying big. I'm not sure. I'm trying to look to see if they called any more states. I don't think any changes have been made. We got the Rock Lobster chiming in saying he thinks the betting line out there, I guess maybe in Vegas, as we're looking at, has flipped to Trump for now. That would certainly seem to be correlating with what we're seeing out there in the futures. I'm not sure anyone seeing any reason for why we're rallying so hard out there right now.
It looks like it's maybe even pulling back just a little bit now. It's a crazy night with these futures, man.
Yeah, there's no liquidity either, right? You put a one lot out there, you're moving it, but I think Trump is starting to do better than people thought. Looks like he's going to win. They're predicting he's going to win Texas. They just hit Bloomberg.
Oh, that could be it then.
I might be on a delayed feed, guys, but the NASDAQ seems to be drastically outperforming the SPUs in the futures market. And, if that's the case, I think that's at least from the research that I've been fed from about 3 or 4 different venues, that's indicating Trump and just kind of DOJ antitrust speculation around big tech from Biden and his task force.
Yeah, our rule for tonight is NASDAQ goes up, it looks like Trump is going to do better, and if S&P goes up, it looks like that's value, and that's more Biden. That's how we're looking at it.
Yeah, I'm echoing that sentiment.
Well, it seems like the markets are echoing that as well, giving back a little bit of that lift right now, but they're certainly pricing in a little bit more upside, or perhaps a lot more upside than they were a little while ago. Mr. Luke, sounds like you got some other bones to pick this time out there with all things Fed. What, the Fed not getting it done for you these days, sir?
The Fed hasn't gotten it done for me for 10 years. And this is nothing political or who's president or who's not, but I just don't understand. Going back to Janet Yellen, who to me is the worst Fed president of all time, and Powell is starting to get close. When the market is going up, why are you constantly talking about raising rates and saying, if we hit these bogeys, we're going to raise rates, we're going to do this, we're going to do that? I think Janet Yellen must have raised rates twice while she was in. One of them was for like 0.15 basis points or something. And this is you're selling the middle class and retirees down the river when you're giving them zero return on their savings and pushing them into risk assets. And then what happens when we have an event in March and a lot of the ultra large hedge funds are levered to the basis trade or whatever, the Fed comes in and bails them out by giving huge liquidity to the market instead of letting some of these funds go under, instead of letting people who take too much risk lose money, go broke, so other people who are disciplined can come in and pick up these assets at a discount or pick them up at a lower price. And it's just been this game's been going on for 10 years. It's nonstop. I mean, why, if the market is so great, if everything's going so great before the pandemic, why didn't you raise rates? Why weren't rates raised? And no one ever asked that. And another thing, if everybody thinks inflation is so low and it's non-existent, I'll do another trade. I'll pay someone 4% or 5%, and I want to pay the same amount I was for babysitting, college, school, dental work, prescriptions, rent, although I don't rent, whatever you want. I'll pay you 5%. If inflation's at zero, then anybody would be willing to take that trade, and I guarantee you, no one will.
Not if you have kids in college. You sure wouldn't take that trade.
No, I feel for you there, Mr. Dan. You've got the big costs here.
Yeah, but I guess I'm saying inflation's not at zero. Don't believe it. And by the way, this is no exaggeration. In the last 25 years, they've changed the way they calculate inflation like 20 times.
And how funny is it that FOMC is meeting, tomorrow? Is there a more ridiculous time for a Fed meeting than the day after? The initial blush of the election will still not even be done. And, of course, the Fed has already announced pretty much what their road plan is for the foreseeable future. And yet they're still insisting on having a meeting on just seems like an odd day to be having a meeting.
You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions@theoptionsinsider.com.